Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Think Preparedness. We are talking about a lot tonight. One of those things is the Omicron variant. Another is what we can expect to see in the year 2022. We've got Cliff from the Urban Prepper, Nate at the Canadian Prepper. You can also visit his website at canadianpreparedness.com. And we've got Chris
right now
from City Prepping. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Good. Yep.
Yeah. It's a little late here, but it's worth it.
Yeah, that's okay. So everybody's talking about Omicron right now. They're saying that, you've got two sides of the story. One, it's going to be the end of the world. And then the other, that it's not really that bad. As we started to see what was happening there, we each shared some communication with each other, including some of the virology reports, some of the initial case reports. And we started to see that it has a lot of infectability, but the severity is decreased. Chris, what is your stance on how much this is going to affect us in our preparedness community and really in the world?
Well, the upside, as you pointed out, is a high rate of transmissibility. According to the initial studies, it is pretty effective in moving between individuals. The other, well, that's the downside, right? The upside is the symptoms tend to be very mild, specifically where the cases at least have been traced at this moment back to South Africa. It appears that as the population is exposed, as the rate goes up, the hospital rate or the rate at which people are hospitalized does not seem to track. It does so far seem to move up accordingly. So that could be the upside to all of this, is that if it moves to the population worldwide, if we develop herd immunity and it has a low the rates of symptoms, or rather the impact from a symptomatic perspective is low, then this could be the ideal situation, right? That it moves through, we all get it. It becomes just nothing more than the flu. Of course, I know some people would already argue that what we've experienced up to this point could be seen in that way, but at least that's the hope right now. But I just don't know, at least from what I've studied, doesn't seem to be a large enough set of data to really form a conclusive opinion at this point.
The kind of devil's advocate argument that I have seen in the discussion in different areas of health and healthcare have been that you have a large percentage of our world's population who has been exposed to COVID already. And so because there is a shift here and people are getting re-exposed, we are seeing younger age groups. Maybe it's already, I hate to put it this way because it's really macabre, but maybe it's already taking the low-hanging fruit, the older people, the people with severe health conditions, things like that. And so they're unsure of whether we're going to just see a renewed wave of long-term problems like long COVID, or like you said, are we going to have some actual positivity here where we can get get out of it? Things are a little bit different in Canada. I know that there's a different perspective. Nate, what are you seeing? How are the people taking it in your area? Do they even care?
Some people care a lot, and probably just like there, some people don't really care at all. I always say the truth is somewhere in the middle with these things. And I really think it's too early to say definitively what the outcome is going to be. I've just read an article that talks about the math of what could potentially go wrong. So apparently this is 3.5 times, or the R naught is 3.5, right. Meaning that if one person can give it to 3.5 people, which is much more transmissible than the Delta. Right. And so if and lots of ifs, because they don't really know yet, but if there's the antibody escape and people who've already been infected or who've already been jabbed are not able to be immune to this, then what you could have is a situation where, even though it's less lethal as far as we know so far, because these things can also continue to mutate too, just like the Delta did. There's the Delta plus and the Mu and all that stuff. So, you could have a situation where you had so many people infected at the same time, where even though it was less lethal, you had more hospital overwhelm, and so you actually exceeded the curve. So, it's hard to say. I know a lot of people right now are like, oh yeah, it's not going to be a big deal, but I'm still treading lightly on that. I'm still cautious because it's so early. We really don't know what's going to happen. We got winter, and you have a lot of places that have opened up, entirely. And, but I'm not the kind of person who's scared of this thing either, really, at least not at this point, based on what I know. So, I think it's still, we don't know exactly how this is going to play out. It's still too early, but the rate of transmission is pretty incredible considering this was, just discovered. Like when Delta was discovered, it took almost like 6 months for it to really peak everywhere. And this, it seems, even Dr. John Campbell is saying, oh, it's going to be here in like 4 weeks. Every place is going to be peaking. So, to me, that's pretty crazy how it could spread that fast. So if the spread is that fast, then we could see some shockers and I think that's going to be, it's going to likely lead to more government interventions, forced interventions, which is probably going to lead to more social unrest potentially, because, if people, I think people already feel quite pushed. And I think some people were thinking that we were going to get out of it. Now it may just be so mild that maybe it's not going to be that bad, but I still think people shouldn't get too, optimistic about things yet. I think maybe just watching it and see what happens, not being scared that it's the end of the world, but I don't think it's over yet, personally. I think 2022 is going to be interesting.
I have a healthy level of skepticism over the severity, but a couple of things I keep going back to. One is that there's lots of people that I trust that have pushed no agenda as far as their own doctorate, their own line of work, the virologists. They're not pushing an agenda. They're not telling you to go do one thing or another. And they're saying, kind of watch out for this, people. And the only people that I see getting on the news saying it's no big deal have a vested interest in pharmaceuticals. Like they're on the board of these pharmaceutical places. And of course it's no big deal for them, because why not? We'll just make another booster, go ahead and take it. It's fine. We'll be at number 18 soon. And so that's where my skepticism comes in. But also I have some close people to me that have long COVID. And I'm talking, these people deny that COVID's even a thing. And they have long COVID. They just tell me, the last time I got sick with the flu, I'm just not getting over it. And if we have a highly transmissible virus that gives a lot of people long COVID, I don't think that's necessarily a position that we want to be in as a society. So I kind of treat it like a lot of other things that I know happen. Let's say violent crime. I treat it like that. I know violent crime happens. I'm not going to go rush into an area and be dumb about it, but I'm also not going to let it stop me from going outside of my house because this one thing could happen. And before the program here, we talked a little bit about how there are those maybe quasi-draconian measures taking place across the country, across the world. And I know Cliff, he has shared some stuff with us behind the scenes where we're seeing this duality. It's really a do as I say, not as I do world. Cliff, do you, without giving any information, do you care to speak on what you've seen, as far as that, the people who make everyone do one thing and then they go about their life like it doesn't even matter, like Boris Johnson today. It just came out that he was, they were throwing big parties during the same time they locked everybody else. And I think you've experienced a little bit of that firsthand.
Yeah, I sometimes share with you guys places that I'm at, because I do a lot of stuff within the greater Seattle area at various functions and things where there's a lot of people there for Omicron or Megatron or whatever the next variant is going to be. I don't really change it's all pandemic preparedness for me. So it's not like I'm changing things based off of what the variant is. I know that locally people, on one sense, they're afraid of it, but on another sense, I feel like people are getting variant burnout. But at least the places that I go, it's like the rich people, they're going to do their thing. They're going to have their parties and they're going to have the help be under more of the restrictions. So like you mentioned, it's like rules for thee, not for me type thing. And I see that all the time, like every weekend at different functions. And it's a super weird feeling too. But I think that people, at least where I'm at within the greater Seattle area, they're being more mindful with testing, as they're more concerned with whether you have it or not versus whether you got a jab or anything like that. But for me, it's like I'm not changing things for me personally with the way that I do preparedness and the way that I go out and the precautions that I make and what type of masks I wear. That's one of my, as a prepper, I think all of us have been having masks for over a decade now. So the thing that drives me bonkers is just kind of like not good masks. So not having N95s or KN95s and having more like lingerie and underwear for it. So
right.
that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, so there's definitely, from what I've seen out in the city, in large settings, there's two different sets of rules, and it's kind of sad to see.
Well, I know that they just issued a kind of a semi lockdown in the UK. It's England's Plan B, and starting Monday, you work from home unless you're an essential worker. Starting Friday, masks will be compulsory, so they're going to make you wear masks in all public venues. In a week's time, the NHS is going to make a COVID pass mandatory for entry to venues, and then they're going to have daily testing. So I think that we in our community, where we're thinking about our own freedoms, our own safety, and our families, we have to watch what other people are doing and see how adoptive those measures might become, in our country. Do you think that we are just entering into an era right now that not many people see coming, where basically drunk driving exists, so let's make sure no one can drive, and that's the solution? Just make sure no one can drive because one of you might be drunk. Do you think that we're there, or that these measures are just going to get harder and harder, or are we going to kind of meet an equilibrium here?
I think it kind of comes down to what's happening in the area. I mean, I know Michigan, I've reading a report today, some of their hospitals are beginning to get overloaded again. My in-laws live in Los Angeles, and I know when everything kind of was at the peak last year, LA was hit especially hard. Their moratoriums and other facilities were overflowing. They couldn't keep pace with the people that were dying.
Right.
Where I live in the Inland Empire. I'm north of San Diego, east of LA. It's when I tell people I'm from Southern Cal, the automatic assumption is you're in hippie territory, but where I live, I grew up in Texas, and if you were to lift somebody from where I live currently and put them in Texas, it's not terribly different. It's a very similar mindset. So where I'm at in this area, I just haven't seen the impact. There's not a lot of rules. There's, when you go into different facilities, it's not really strict, but you go into LA, you got to have evidence of certain things. You have to follow very strict protocols, even going into restaurants. I think it's just going to be contingent upon how severe it gets in the area and how the public,
Perceives it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you said LA. I just read a report the other day from things that are happening in LA. And of course, LA is LA on its own, but they're issuing reports that are coinciding with things taking place in other areas like Chicago and Atlanta, where people are being followed home and attacked. They're being followed home because they either, the police chief in LA said, don't wear your expensive jewelry. If you have a nice car, you might be targeted. Do you think that that's sort of a larger breakdown, and we're going to see that more of that sort of thing, where if you've got it, somebody wants it? And what do you think might be behind that?
I know for me locally, one of the big prep things that I did over the past few weeks is that there's a big problem with people stealing catalytic converters on vehicles, and they're stealing them on pilots and on CRX. Not a pilot, but I have a Honda Element and the other one, Priuses. Sorry, because that's what it is. So it's like a huge problem that people are getting more brazen with that. And now I had to invest in a catalytic converter shield that gets attached to the frame of the vehicle, because people were surprised that I hadn't got mine stolen, because there's a huge market for it, where basically it's very easy to take off with a Sawzall, basically in less than a minute. They're selling it for around $100 to $200 to a middleman. The middleman's then getting about a dozen of them, sending them to a smelter, where then they break it down, because the things that are inside of the catalytic converter are worth a lot, like palladium and other things. And then it's big money. It's like, and it's just crazy. So people are getting more brazen with that kind of thing. So now with all my vehicles, I feel like I have to protect it from this kind of thing. And then maybe in 2022, and then maybe they'll start stealing gas or something. And it's just making it's easy money for some people, and it's a big pain in the butt for the people that have to deal with it. And the people that suffer are the ones that are, I don't think that the muffler shops aren't suffering because they get more business from it. So,
Yeah, right. That's something that really surprises me is we are living through kind of that strange time where we are in like two realities at the same time. For our preparedness communities, it's more of the same. We just have more affirmation of why to prepare. And a lot of members of our community are like, okay, this is exactly why we do these things that we do. But then also we're living in this really dystopian world where, like you said, people are going to be in America going and stealing gas, and they're already stealing car parts, and you're having targeted theft. You have to wear your mask and show your passport and do these things. I mean, if you were to write down all of the things that we experienced in 2020 and 2021 and showed that to somebody 5 years ago, they'd be like, no way, the entire world would fall apart. The nation would crumble. There'd be, riots everywhere. And I think that we're trying to normalize this as a society. So where really are we going to be? What do you guys think? And I'd like to get something from each one of you. Where do you think we're going to be at in 2022? Do you think that it's going to be more of the same? What's your opinion of where we're going to be there, and how can we get ready for it?
In regards to this issue specifically, or just
no,
in general?
in general, like, are we going to be to the point where everybody is just attacked on every front, where your gas is stolen, your house is broken into, your inflation is up so high you can't afford anything? Where do you think we'll be, Chris?
Well, I just did a video, I think last week, talking about some of the predictions I have for 2022. And if you watch the video, it's not some radical big stuff. It's more on par with what we've already seen this year play out and probably continue to be amplified next year. Issues with inflation, job, the scarcity of laborers in the market right now. People are realizing their worth, and the dynamics have shifted toward the laborer versus the hiring company.
Yeah.
So it kind of getting back to your main question, where things are going, especially in discussion with these different crime issues and such. I mean, clearly we're in a time of discontent. Last year was a very marked year of discontent. This year has not. I mean, it feels like things have kind of settled to a point this year, but there's still, again, that underlying just something's not right here.
Yeah.
And for all of us that remember September 11th, just how things changed in a moment. There was an America before and there's America after, and it's never really been the same. And I think, again, we're kind of going through that. It feels like another phase where it's, sorry, Nate, I hope we're not leaving you out in America up there. I'm sure in Canada, y'all had your own changes you've had to go through. But it's just overall, I think we're all having to wake up to a new reality that things are not going to be the same as they were before. And even in the issue with crime, look, I've lived in third world nations, and you have to keep your head on a swivel. You have to pay attention to what's going on around you. Things change quickly if you're not paying attention. And that doesn't mean live in paranoia by any means. But again, I shared in the last video an incident that I had recently that kind of caught me off guard and taught me that I need to pay attention more. It appears at least things are moving in a different direction. I know that's overgeneralized, but those are my 2 cents.
What do you think, Nate?
Now for the good news.
Okay.
Well, I like what you said earlier about how, it appears as though they're almost, there's this unanimous message that we're getting in the media right now that, this is not a big deal anymore, right? So it almost like reminds me of early last year when they said it wasn't a big deal. It almost reminds me of the whole, you don't need to wear a mask and all this. So you got me thinking about, well, maybe this is actually going to be worse than because of the fact that we're letting it run on like this. Now, at the same time, you can't satisfy everybody, because if you start, fear mongering about it, then people are going to call you out on that. So I guess the jury's still out. But one thing's for sure is that I did a video probably a few years ago, which talked about how without rule of law, this concept WROL that we talk about in the preparedness community begets excessive rule of law. Because if you have violence in the streets, rampant violence in the streets, and it's going to get to the point where people want soldiers in the streets to protect them.
Yeah, right.
So at some point, even Gavin Newsom was taking a harder stance, much harder than, I think a lot of people have ever seen from him taking. I don't know if it was just words or if it's going to materialize into anything, but with response to the smash and grabs and the mob looting of shops and stuff like that, which is starting to become more commonplace. So what they're going to do for that, who knows? I mean, is there going to be more armed, police in the streets? Are the police going to get more militant? And is that just going to, is that going to add to the whole draconian fray that we're now in with this whole stuff? But once things start getting mandated, as it appears that things are slowly kind of moving towards that direction, we really have to see how the Austria experiment plays out with the mandatory jabs and whether or not that spreads throughout the rest of the world, because that could lead to, that could really change the whole landscape of what we're talking about here next year at the same time. So I do think that I do anticipate that this Omicron thing is probably going to spread pretty fast, and it could have the potential to lead to more economic disruptions. The markets are really sketchy right now. They really don't know what they want to do. It appears that there's this, I think right now there's this dead cat bounce going on because people think that Omicron's not going to big deal, but I anticipate that there's, that the downtrend is coming. I wouldn't say the crash necessarily, but we've been riding high in the stock market for the last 2 years, more or less. And since the whole thing crashed last March. And there has to come a point where, that the party is over, I guess you could say, and we got to deal with the hangover. So I unfortunately, before I came into this conversation, I was actually kind of feeling good. Then I listened to what you guys are saying, and you get me thinking about these things. And now I'm not so optimistic. Not that I was ever optimistic. I was realistic, but now I'm even more pessimistic because just the nature of this Omicron thing, and if that really infects the markets in the same way that it did, and that disrupts the supply chain. Like here in Canada, we had this huge disaster out on the West Coast just a few weeks ago.
I remember you showed me the pictures. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, and it was very significant because this was a flood which they're calling it a 500-year flood. Some people are saying, oh, that's exaggerated. It's only a 100-year flood. But what made it unique was that they predicted this flood was going to happen at some point, but they predicted it was going to happen in spring after the glacial runoff and after, the winter, not after a year of record drought. Like I was out there on the West Coast earlier this year, and it was bone dry. Like you could throw a match, and this is Canada's temperate rainforest. Okay. You could literally throw a match and the entire Vancouver Island would light on fire. And to have these atmospheric rivers, as they're calling them, 3 of them back to back, this is a new term they're using. If you look at it on a satellite, it looks as though there's like this river of rain flowing over this one region. And to have 3 of these back to back was completely unprecedented. So this knocked out all the major highways that connect Vancouver, which is where we get the most of our stuff shipped over from China, to the rest of Canada. It knocked out the railway. So, you can imagine this caused logistical chaos. So if these situations continue to add more to the fire, in 2022, if things like this continue to happen, and they're still dealing with that, they're still rebuilding the highways, because these are really, it really revealed one of the Achilles heels of Canada, which is the fact that we are this very long country, which all of us reside within 100 miles of the US border. So it's very easy to disconnect the entire country. It doesn't take much. And when you have these serious infrastructure projects like the mountain highways and the mountain railway systems, which are very complicated and intricate, require a lot of sophisticated construction, you take one of those out and, we're, completely cut off. So, if these situations continue to mount, you got to ask yourself, well, when's the breaking point going to be? And I hate to say it, I just don't think the light at the end of the tunnel is near. I think we have a a ways to go before things get better. With my suppliers, there's still the one good thing about prepping products and the suppliers that supply the store is that a lot of them are preparedness minded. So they kind of anticipated these things. Like I was talking to the Harvest Right guys, the guys who make the freeze dryers.
Yeah.
And they, they're from Utah, so they kind of see these things coming. They're preppers, right? So they're like, yeah, we bought up a bunch of chips because we anticipated that there was going to be a chip shortage.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the companies in our genre, fortunately, have actually shown a lot of resilience throughout this supply disruption, but it's still backlogged seriously. And then there's the fact that shipping is so high that, and if this thing really does, if the Omicron thing spreads so fast that it goes into another lockdown, then I do think we're going to be in serious economic trouble.
That gets out of control. I mean, the supply chain's already just trying to claw its way back, right? I mean, it feels like we're almost at that point, maybe in 6 months, where we can get back to normalcy. But if it's just one more wrench gets thrown in, I mean, it's kind of all bets are off. It's, I just hope we don't start back at square one.
I mean, China basically came out and said officially that if they were to let up from their strict containment measures, the entire country would fall apart. They just don't have the healthcare infrastructure to handle even, let's just say that it was just mild symptoms. They just don't have the healthcare infrastructure to handle that magnified by 10 times a seasonal expectation, because for decades we have run our entire world on the expectation that next year was going to be like last year. And so we would only prepare as far as healthcare or nursing or staffing or whatever it might be, law enforcement, for as bad as things might have gotten last year. So China said, we can't do anything. This is all we can do. And so I think we're not going to see that catch up from China for months, years, maybe even, as they continue to slowly let it burn its way through the country. And so from our own needs here in our nation, here in our continent, I think we're just going to see more of the same there. I saw a picture on Reddit today from a person in Canada, and they said, here's my $95 purchase today. And it was a grocery store, and it had literally, you could fit all of the items that they got right here. It had like an $8.50 ham that was prepackaged, not ham, slices of ham for sandwiches, some other goods, some other boxes, and it was $95, this one little thing. I think that when Nate has said that with his site, he expected a huge increase. And Nate, you were talking about you might even have to take off any coupons anytime soon, because the prices just have to find a balance here somewhere with what the manufacturers are increasing their prices to. I think that next year, the economy is going to be one of my biggest concerns. And so my wife and I are trying to do everything we can to get in the right position now. And for my community, those positions start pretty small. So whether that's having a chicken or a couple of chickens to make sure that you have those eggs yourself, or if you can scale that up and try to make a little bit of money, well, I sell my fertilized chicken eggs and people can do this themselves, or making something at home. I think that you can start real small and get an ROI on your time invested. But then I think we have to think about bigger things too, because like you said, Chris, people have given up the strict work eligibility that that structure that they adhered to for decades. It was just without even thought. They were like, okay, I'm only worth $9 an hour. And right now they're like, hold on, this is my life. If you want me to work 8 hours, 12 hours a day and struggle still to get my bills paid, that's just not going to happen. I might as well just struggle to get my bills paid and put the screw to your working. And so I think that the economy is going to be the big thing that I watch for 2022. And whether that affects everybody equally, or like Cliff said, there's the well-to-do have a completely different set of rules, and then the not well-to-do are the ones following them home to steal their groceries or whatever it might be. We're going to see a little bit more of that. So that's my thoughts on where we're going to be headed. I think we're going to see more crime increase, even in places where right now they're buffered. I think that we're going to expect and normalize our cost of living, where that $60,000 house became a $90,000 house. Your grocery bill almost doubled throughout the month. People are going to struggle, and we're going to have that invisible line in the sand somewhere where a lot of people are going to cross their own, and they're going to act out, because that social order that keeps us all from being animals against each other, I think, is wearing a little bit thin. And when that happens, that's when we look for those bigger events like the riots or the discontent to take place.
Yeah. Sorry. I was going to say a little bit on the crime thing for 2022. I definitely feel that we're going to see more and more of these kind of flash mob things where people are just doing it because what's the problem with that? I mean, I hope they don't do a flash mob to Canadian Preparedness Warehouse or something, because Angry Pepper
don't put that out there.
Angry Pepper will have something to do with it. We'll be pissed off about
A lot of
that.
silky salts are going to just, yeah.
My back.
Yeah, he has your back, fortunately, but not everyone has the same All-American Prepper at the security. And it's just one positive thing, I guess, with the financial thing is I see a lot of people, they have their side hustles going. So like they used to have like their 9-to-5 job, but now they have a backup job, and they have their side hustle. They're selling things on Etsy. They're doing an eBay business. They have a YouTube channel. They're doing something on Twitch, or they're doing all sorts of different things to have income coming from multiple sources, because they don't know when one of those sources will go. And I know I'm along that line as well. It's just super frustrating that so much of what's going on now, at least me, myself, I find myself watching less and less of the news and tuning off things because everything just feels so fake. It feels like it's pro wrestling and that there's baby faces and there's heels. There's President Jack Tunney when Macho Man, he wasn't the president, Vince McMahon was for that. And I feel like we live in a fake society and that's why I think people listen to us, because we're, just some dudes with cameras in our bedrooms. The music today is fake. Everyone's auto-tuned. Everything that you see on Instagram for the supermodels, they have fake body parts and
filters,
people that filters. It's just like people, and so I think the people that are doing the side hustles that are authentic, that are real, that are speaking the truth from their heart, and like the stuff that everyone on this says on this, I think Preparedness. I mean, people are going to gravitate towards that, and so which is really good. But I know myself personally, I'm taking more security measures than I've ever done before. As far as I have body armor in my backpack, and I have it in my computer bag. I have pepper spray in every pocket. I have pepper spray now in every single external door at my home, just in case I didn't happen to have some other form of protection at our home. I have more motion alerts for someone coming into the driveway, and I'm upping my camera system. I'm doing all those kind of things because the bad guys are getting more and more free. They feel free that they could do it and they could get away with it, and they're going to get a slap on the wrist, and it's just going to get worse and worse. So I think as preppers that we need to up our game as well. So.
That flash mobs, that really came out of left field for me. I didn't expect that. That wasn't something that I was expecting to happen. I certainly saw the potential, but for it to be more than a one-off, because every time that something like that has happened in our past in America, the cops came down really hard. And there was a whole bunch of media attention to how we caught this many of the mob. And so it gave the idea to the people who wanted to do it that they weren't going to get away with it, even though most of them probably did. And that was all just for show in the media. They at least had the idea that, hey, maybe we're going to get caught. And I think that kind of went away. So the continuation of that was really strange for me. And I think we do have that concern where who's going to be next? Is it going to turn to flash mobs against a house? Because what's really happening here? Are they communicating on social media in a form that we can monitor, that we need to start monitoring? Where that collective mind turns to, okay, let's not do Best Buy, let's go to this guy, and they go and take that guy's house because they know he's got his political ideals on his truck. He's got his AK-47 or his AR-15 stickers. They know they're going to get something in that house, and they go and take it. And since that kind of came out of left field for me, I question what's going to happen next there with that mentality, because I watched those videos of those flash mobs, and it really is that wild dog pack mentality where they just go after it. And it doesn't seem like I didn't see anybody there even looking around like, man, I don't want to get caught. It was just, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go get it. We're going home.
Well, the only good news in all this is that flash what was it, the flash dances where they used to do those at the mall?
Yeah, right.
Those are
It
gone.
used to
So
be all
I,
fun and games. But now it's
I know. I guess the replacement. I'm. I can live with that. I couldn't handle the other stuff. Yeah, it's like I was saying earlier. I mean, having lived in environments where you've got to pay attention. For me personally, I don't feel like I live in paranoia, nor has any of this caused me to change the way I live. But it definitely has made me think a little more that I should, again, situational awareness, just give more time and attention. Because even, for example, at the gas pump, just going, and it's so easy to just look at the phone, see what's going on, or the TV that's on the pump next to you that they have some commercial, and kind of doze off and not pay attention. But it's, again, there's a fine line between going into paranoia and just paying attention to what's going on around you. And I hope that people don't, as Americans, that we don't become paranoid. That's just not a fun country to live in. But again, with everything happening,
You said
attention.
gas pump, don't you mean electronic vehicle charging station?
Yeah, I'm not an EV yet. That's the next purchase down the road. Nate, are you on EVs yet?
That
I'm
that
always
bike,
talking
he's got
about
that
'em, I just
Rambo
haven't
bike.
pulled the trigger yet. So
The bike was
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. Are you? Oh, yeah. You still have your gas truck. Okay.
still have a
But you-
gas truck, but I got a cyber truck on order. So, but I was going to say, like, you talked about like the house, like rating houses like that, and I think once we kind of cross that line, and Angry Prepper was talking about this the other day about flash mobs. Is that what we're calling them? I don't know if that's what we're calling them, but going to grocery stores and doing this. And I think once we cross that line to where people are doing it to get their basic needs met, that's when
yeah.
we've really, we're really in a different world, because
Yeah.
it's such an efficient strategy when you think about it, because you never know when it's going to happen. You have safety in numbers, and the only real way to protect against it is even if you have a police presence, it's just like in the riots. There was cops standing right there while people were doing stuff. I don't even think that would be enough to deter. So you'd have to have a pretty heavy-handed panoptical presence, like surveillance cameras everywhere. And so the trade-off is probably ultimately going to be, like I said, excessive rule of law.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you can really balance these things out. So it's going to turn into like a Judge Dredd situation where, either you're going to have these really heavy-handed militant cops walking around who are, more emboldened because they have really no other option. But it does remind me, when I was thinking about, these mobs, if you ever seen the movie Demolition Man, there's a scene where all the poor people, they're raiding in the future, the only franchise that survived is Taco Bell in this fictional universe. And
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Makes sense, right? And so there's a scene where all the poor people raid a Taco Bell for food because that's all there is, right? So we're almost to that point, which is scary because there's so many other things that movie got right. But yeah,
like
I think
the three
really
seashells.
the 3 Cs. I'm still waiting for that because
Well, I thought I could get it on the website.
soon. Yeah,
That's next gen bidet stuff.
it's in progress. Yeah, but I think we definitely, like Cliff said, we have to at all times within whatever room you're in the house. And I was going to do a survey about this just to gauge the community to see where people are at in terms of personal security, because do you have a means of self-defense within reach? Because it can happen anytime, and that doesn't mean like living in paranoia. It just means being at the ready, like, do you have your pocket knife on you at all times? Do you have pepper spray? Do you have, do you have eyes? Do you have levels of defense, as I call them, with, like security system, surveillance is the best thing, detection systems, early warning systems.
Dogs
These
outside.
are things, dogs, are perfect for that. So yeah, people really need to start taking personal security, because this could get bad.
Yeah, and now with the flash mobs, you're allowed to wear masks too, so it's not that big of a deal to walk into a bank with a whole bunch of people with masks and stuff. I kind of feel like the security guards aren't enabled; they're not enabled to do anything about it. The only thing that I could think that you could do is just lock everyone in there and
and it's the perfect cover, because even if you're going to go rob a place, you don't look suspicious when you're approaching the place with full face covering like we once would.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the only way to identify people after that is what they were wearing at that point in time, or their height or something, you know.
They'll probably start doing more and more of like the cell phone warrants for location-based tracking and stuff, where they could do that. I was always trying to wonder how they communicate with each other. Like, do they use, like, I have like the little GoTenna meshes. Do they use the GoTenna mesh, or do they use Signal or Telegram, or how they're doing that?
They're that sophisticated.
Okay, so it's just an unencrypted text message to everyone.
Probably like internet chat rooms or something. Who knows?
Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of calls for vigilantism, you know, and I think that as we get more toward militarization and harder and more heavy-handed repercussions, I think you're going to see a lot more people who are like, yeah, that person got what they deserved. And especially with those recent trials that, you know, we underwent in the US, let me tell you, I talked with a couple of people about it, and I was very, you know, guarded in my opinion on it. And there was fervent, like, yes, he should have gone and done those things. And so I think that it, as a nation or as a continent or just as, you know, as people, when we start saying you need to go after someone and attack them rather than letting the police do their work, we have a total loss of confidence. And with that loss of confidence, you know, I think we're just perpetuating our own fall into that world without a rule of law, like you said. And that cycle might just repeat itself over and over again, where you have, I've said it for a couple of years on the channel, you have three main things that happen over and over again that I see. And that's independence, followed by a time of relative freedom, followed by tyranny. And then tyranny leads to that independence. That independence is followed by a time of relative freedom. And then you have tyranny again. And I think that we're kind of entering that time of tyranny right now, where it's just going to be really interesting. So as far as what happens for 2022, I mean, like you said, Cliff, make sure every room of your house has a way to defend yourself. And the good thing about that, and your way of thinking with that, is that once it's there, it's not like, you know, some guy sitting there and, you know, holding his Glock all day, every day, and just, you know, he's thinking about nothing. That you have your security implements, they're there, and you can go about your daily life. You just know that you've done what you feel is enough to do to be able to make sure that everyone in your family is going to be okay. So I think that that's important, to reach that point where you go, okay, I've prepared for this. I've taken a gauge of where the world is at. I'm going to do what I think is prudent or the best thing to do. And now I can go back to, you know, kind of enjoying the good things about life.
Yeah, totally. And for all the security and measures that I put, it doesn't have to be like a pepper spray. It could be a fire extinguisher next to a doorway. I mean, that would hurt, or the back of a toilet would also hurt. There's different measures too. But yeah, I think it's probably good right now before, you know, now's a good time. If you're thinking about it, now's a good time to do it. Do a walk around your house and see how you would put yourself in their shoes if you're a bad guy, and what would you do? What would be the best way of going through it? I think so much on looking on the outside, but not looking from their eyes. And so I think kind of having to think like how they do to help protect yourself. And again, you know, I have a family and I have kids, and they rely on me for providing for them and for also for their protection. And so that's part of my job. So.
Yeah, it's smart.
What do you guys think, these people who aren't working, how are they making ends meet? Like, is it like a generational thing where they're living off the exploits of the previous generation? Is it a bunch of like lazy millennials? Like, I keep hearing these news reports of people aren't working, but so what are they doing? How are they surviving? This is what I don't really understand. Do you guys know what they're doing to get by?
I've done some digging there, but I'd like to hear what Chris has to say on it.
Oh no, I was only laughing the lazy millennial comment. Hey, we're starting to sound like old people, aren't we?
Darn millennials.
There's millennials.
Some of us
No,
are late millennials, so we're talking about ourselves here too.
I think we're all Gen X here. I mean, Nate, you're the youngest of the group, I suppose. Cliff, how old are you?
I'm a Gen X.
Okay, that's yeah.
Well, you want my mother's maiden name too?
Last
Are we
four of your
talking about-
social
hold on.
security.
Are we talking about moms here? Or no?
Oh wow! Wow! Oh,
That's
jeez.
for after
Yeah.
the show.
We'll edit that out later. So no. Getting back to your question, Nate, who are these people? What are they doing? I don't know. I've got family members that are, the typical millennials. They great people. The ones in my family, they kind of like what Cliff was talking about earlier. The life of side hustles. It's a lot of them have had to think way differently from the job market perspective. Some have the typical 9 to 5, but those are the exception. They're not the rule. For most of my life, I've kind of been used to doing just whatever. I've always kind of taking ideas and try to innovate and start businesses. I've never been a kind of a 9 to 5 job kind of guy, but I think this next generation coming up, they're looking and they're seeing that the system. And again, I'm overgeneralizing. I apologize if someone's watching and that's part of their generation, but from what I can gauge, you were mentioning earlier, Brad, about looking at Reddit. I enjoy looking at Reddit on a frequent basis because it kind of gives me a pulse of what's coming in the next generation. And I know it's not just purely a millennial platform, but there's definitely a strong discontent. There's a popular subreddit called Anti-Work, and it's grown well over 1 million subscribers here in the last several months. It's become a very large sub, and it's essentially people posting their positions of, quitting jobs, waking up to the realization that the job they have is no longer going to take care of them for the rest of their life, that it's not going to be loyal to them. So why would they be loyal in response? And my parents, their generation, my father, he had the same job pretty much his entire life. And they took care of him pretty much from the start to the time he retired. And that was a different generation. So all that to say, kind of getting back to your point, Nate, for me, I have a sense of compassion and sympathy for this next generation because there are no guarantees for them. And that would be really difficult. And I was kind of meaning to ask Brad in the conversation, we kind of touched on just a little about class warfare. Well, I don't know if we necessarily went down that path, but I just feel like I don't know if that's going to be the next evolution of what we'll see in this country, where there's just going to be a strong extreme of haves and have-nots. And it kind of leads into what you're talking about, Nate, with just when it goes from grabbing luxury items at stores to actually grabbing necessities, we cross the threshold. And that's my concern with this next generation is they're not going to live with the same standard that we had in our generation. And I do fear for them. I do have a sense of compassion. I don't see them as lazy. I see a lot of them as just, they don't feel like the system is really, they feel almost locked out of the system. I'm not by any means excusing, but I can definitely see their position. At least that's kind of the view I have.
I feel like with a lot of them, I kind of admire some of the way that they think about things. Like, hey, I don't need to have a humongous house. I'm just going to have a room, and I don't really care about furniture anymore. And why should I work 9 to 5 until I'm 65 years old, and then just to save up for retirement and enjoy the last 7 minutes when I'm an old person? Like they're thinking about their side hustle and having multiple different things. Maybe some of their side hustles aren't necessarily legal, but some of them are. I know a lot of folks that they don't make a lot of money. I know someone that works at a mattress store, and he has a crypto side hustle, and nice. I think he makes more than I do. So he's doing pretty well. So
nice.
I think a lot of people are doing that. The young, now there's some that are probably just living in the basement, but I think that we also have people in our generation that also live in the basement too. But I think that the way that they're looking at things, like, I don't want to have a car. I'm going to just ride Uber when I need to go somewhere, and I'm going to have a bike. And it's a lot cheaper. They don't have to get maintenance for it. They don't have to have a parking spot. They don't have to do all these, put gas in it, and don't have to worry about some of the things. So it feels in some way that they're optimizing living life and enjoying it in the moment, and not being so tied into the superficial things. Oh, I'm gonna drink Soylent, and I'm not gonna worry about what I want to eat. And it's like, oh, okay, you're free from that. And so in one way, I kind of admire it, but in the other way, I don't relate with it. My generation, we played with Transformers and GI Joes. Millennials played with Power Rangers.
Omicron.
Power Rangers. I was never into that.
Yeah. I think that I've always had a little bit of that anti-work in my own personality or personality disorder, depending on which sort of professional you might be talking to. And I think that, I always felt like we were born into a system that I would have never voted for. I would have never opted for. And in a lot of ways, the school system failed me growing up. And so I had to go out and do my own thing. And, I've never told anybody this before, but I dropped out of school at a very young age, went and got my GED and started working for my brother full time. I'll say legally by the time I was 16. And so from that point on, I had to do my own thing. That no one was going to help you. No one was going to do anything for you. But also I was like, hold on, we got born into this system where the idea, the perfect picture is that you go to daycare, you go to school, you get out of school, you go to college. They'll give you whatever kind of credit card and home loan that you want in college, because then you're stuck for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You have $30,000 if you're easy on debt, unless you were lucky enough to get a scholarship, and that's like a lottery system. So you're going to be paying that college debt. You're going to be paying your car note. You're going to be paying your mortgage. And then at one point in time, you'll rinse and repeat. And only a very small number of people won't rinse and repeat. And so I was like, yeah, that sucks. That's not what I want to do. And so, I have a lot of empathy for their way of thinking, and that they don't want to be in that system anymore. But I also know that it's going to bring a lot of disruption to our way of life, in general, because and look at what happened with Kellogg's. Have you guys followed what happened with Kellogg's just
Yeah,
today?
they've laid everybody off. They're going to hire a whole new, you're just going to go out and hire new people and let go of all the people that were trying to negotiate. I guess it got to a 3% raise, and they were like, the unions, they, of course, good for them. They push back, but
Right.
the direction you're going with this is it's America. America runs on cheap labor.
That's right.
And now that's being taken away because people are waking up to the realization that they're worth more than what they've been sold out on.
Eventually, it's going to bring in the automation as well, too.
It
will
bring in the automation. Yep.
Yeah, and that's what I fear. I have the same concerns that I know where you're going with this. Brad, is that and again, where's the cycle have to end? Because I respect that people are choosing not to be part of that system that is not going to benefit them in the end, for the most part. I mean, there's always exceptions, but people are waking up that they're going to be squeezed for every penny, every ounce they can get. This corporation, and I've never. I do appreciate you sharing that story. It's fascinating, your background, because one of my old business partners, similar story. He dropped out the education system early on, and one of the smartest guys I know, but he's like, I'm just not going to play this game. He kind of figured it out. But if this happens in mass, though, I'm very concerned. I'm curious, what is the supply chain going to look like if people just choose not to work it?
Yeah, how much is that's really where I see it going is, okay, so they brought in this group of automation, these robots, and you've got these caretakers of these robots, which are really just like drone operators in the military. But to bring in this automation costs, $600 bazillion trillion is what they'll tell us, because that's why they need our prices to go up. And then you have all these people struggling to pay for the repayment of this automation. And I think we're setting our own house on fire. And as this is continuing, I think we're just going to be in a really tough position to have the luxury, because let's face it, we're in America. I mean, a lot of people have it a lot worse than we do, or North America, or even the Western world. And we have luxury right now. We still have that. And I think that that's going to deteriorate. And as it does, people are going to deteriorate. And I think you can kind of see from a morality standpoint that every time a civilization decides to kind of clean slate themselves, there's a huge increase in a decline, I should say, in morality. And so you have more murders, you have, I hate to even hit any sensitive topics here, but you have an over sexualization of an entire society. You have all these things happening, and then society sort of unravels. So are we there? I don't think we're there by any means, but I do think that anti-work is just another one of those parts of the chain that we're going to see, draw us into that bigger picture.
One of the things I'm worried about as a father, I have a kid that eventually we're going to have to decide what he wants to do. And the route that you talked about, Brad, I mean, do I want my kid to get in, a couple $100,000 of debt with a college education on whatever he decides that he wants to do? And and then just be struggling. I've worked with so many people like that in my career where they got a really good job, but they're $300,000 in debt because they went to a prestigious school and got their master's and all these things. And it's like a house payment. And or do they go and And right after that, does he take an apprenticeship or something, become a journeyman,
Right.
and have no college, no debt, and then be done with it after 4 years and have actual work history and
Right.
know how to work and know how to come to work on time and to be a leader in their job and make six figures. A lot of these people, we're going to have to come to that decision for my family pretty soon on that, like that. But
Yeah,
Wow.
I have my oldest son is getting near to that age where he can make his own decisions himself about his future. And I'm pretty liberal with, telling him, these are the choices that you have. I'm going to support you in whatever you want to do, but these are your choices. And he washes back and forth over that structured future that he can build for himself, or the unstructured future where there's a little bit more risk, but the risk has maybe a more rewarding mental health benefit, or purpose of self. And 100 years ago, you learned your skill, you learned a trade, and you went on to develop and use that trade to make money. And it was almost a guarantee that unless you were a screw up, you were going to be able to use that trade. There weren't very many blacksmiths who then decided to go and become doctors. They were a blacksmith. And so maybe we'll get back into that, where the side hustle just becomes, the way of life. And so whether you do photography, or you have an opinion and other people enjoy your opinion, or you're showing them how to do things because you just learned how to do it. I have people who help me with things that never went to school for it, as far as just stuff on the property or things that we're doing together to build together. Didn't go to school for it, but knows how to do it. And it's something that I don't have that skill set for. And so we teach each other. Maybe that's the future that we'll see. And I kind of hope that that's the case, as long as it doesn't bring in the deficit in our ability to provide.
yeah, there's a great book by from the Grovestead called Durable Trades, and where they talk about some of the professions that have lasted the test of time through economic downturns and upturns, and a lot of the stuff that these trades that people learn. I know that a lot of kids also, they want to be YouTubers, like they want to be like us and talk
Sure.
Talk in front of a camera. Hopefully they don't come up with some AI robot that's also a YouTube prepper, and they're gonna, because then we're all out of the job. So.
Oh man, you just did it. Somebody's going to go and deep fake Nate tonight.
Yeah, they're gonna be.
I know. You're gonna have to work. Get to work doubly hard, Nate. It's gonna be hard.
There should be an all-American prepper deep fake though. I like.
Oh, I'd pay for that.
To it. Yeah,
There's
I would
enough-
pay for a membership.
Not enough content out there to make a all-American pepper deep fake, but I think there's, as much as I agree that there is this new pressure on the young generation, and there's less consistency in the work that you do throughout the rest of your life. I wonder how much of this, though, because I'm hearing that you guys are sympathizing with the young generation, and there certainly is undoubtedly this genuine, for lack of better terms, like Marxist angst right now, that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. But like you said, Brad, we still do have it better here. Like, people are migrating here because there's opportunity. So how much of this is really just, I feel entitled because of the delusions of hustle culture and everybody, get rich quick schemes with Bitcoin and all the rest. Like, you shouldn't have to work. It's like the Wojak meme, right? You guys are familiar with that Wojak meme? Okay, so it's like that, where I shouldn't have to do much to get a lot. And I think how much of what we're seeing right now with this abandoning of work is that entitlement mentality, and how much of it is this, genuine discontent with the system, So I guess I foresee that the virtual space is what people are probably going to migrate to now with the dawn of this whole metaverse. And I think jobs with Zoom and all these things, we're gonna, like you said, automation is probably going to come to fulfill the role. So what does that leave people to do? Well, create content and create virtual stuff. So potentially that might be where this heads, but I think at some point we might actually see a rude awakening for a lot of people who have been sold on this lie that you don't have to work. You can just, live in your car and, lead this hyper minimalist lifestyle. and everything's going to be okay. Like, I think at some point people are going to see that that's a fruitless existence. If you can't have enough money to settle down and have a family, either we're going to see a revolt, or maybe not a revolt, but a 99, we're the 99% 2.0, or yeah, I don't know what the alternative would be,
Well,
or
do you
people
think
are just going to have
grifters?
to suck it up and get back to work. I mean, it's, if you can't make a living wage, like if Kellogg's is in this position where they have the ability to lay off this many people, who are they hiring? Who
Immigrants
are
is
they going to,
what I saw.
who's going to replace them? So if there's people who are willing to replace them,
Yeah.
that means that nothing will change. But, if there isn't, then maybe something will change. But,
Now, you asked,
if people's wages can't keep pace with inflation, then, that's definitely going to be problematic and could lead to civil unrest.
yeah, you asked, what got us going here is you asked, what are people doing if they're not working? A lot of the communities that I've seen talk about it, they're moving in with family, they're moving in with friends. I think the grifter mentality, like you said, sleeping out of your car, it might seem romantic, and then you do it for 4 nights and you're like, oh no, this isn't for me. But I think that, at least where I grew up in Florida, there was everybody in a home, and then there were the trailer parks. Now, after moving to Alabama, in my opinion, I'm sorry to offend anyone here, but everybody who had the trailer park mentality in Florida is a normal resident in Alabama. And, the separation is much different. You have the high class, and then there's literally just everybody else, where they try to be frugal and they try to get by any means. And in Florida, it was like the difference was the middle class trying to be that high class, and then everybody else was down below. So is it just that the lower class mentality, the grifter mentality, the side hustle mentality is just going to become acceptable and normal, and people will just do whatever it takes to make that lifestyle work for them because they have healthier a healthier mind and body? I guess that's the unknown for me, but I see it kind of going that direction where they're willing to take some personal space sacrifice. They'll board up with friends and family, they'll live with they'll rent, share, they'll do all those different things just so that they don't have to work as much, and then they work literally as little as they have to in that corporate world to get by. I kind of think that that's where we'll be for a couple of seasons, at least, maybe even a couple of years, unless something shakes us out of that.
And you could do that because a lot of people aren't having kids nowadays, right? So
yeah, right.
That sort of lifestyle is only permissible if you don't have children. So if we're moving into an era where people aren't going to have kids anymore, then yeah, the nomadic free roaming lifestyle is feasible, where you don't own anything and you're happy. But as soon as you bring kids into the mix, that's when it becomes problematic. So if we do see this post-COVID baby boom, like they've been telling us, then maybe that'll force people back into having to I work with I have some people who work with me at CanadianPreparedness.com who
What is that
are
again? Write that down.
www.CanadianPreparedness.com. Okay,
Got it.
but they're people who immigrated here to Canada, and just the difference in how a lot of people who've immigrated here approach work, it seems to me, they don't see it in the kind of humdrum, mundane way that we're depicting it. Even
It's opportunity for them.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I understand that there's obviously more to life than making somebody else money, and nobody wants to feel like they're exploited. But at the same time, there's two different mentalities here, and so long as you have people who are willing to do the work and who view it as an opportunity, that's not going to change. So either the other people have to adapt, or maybe make the side hustle the main hustle. Is there enough room in the market for everybody to have a hustle, I guess, is the next question. But maybe we'll save that for our talk on the economy and Bitcoin in a few weeks.
Yeah, well, I think with the hustle, the whole thing with hustle is that I admire people that hustle and that are they're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, or they're always working. I don't like the entitled thing. So when we say side hustle, to me, that means that, yeah, you have your side hustle, but you're like working. You're not just thinking that anything's given to you and you're an entrepreneur for yourself, not for some corporation or something. And that's the part I like. But the people that kind of just sit around and smoke stuff and all those kind of things. Yeah, that's not my kind of people.
There's millennials again.
In an
Those-
ideal
I come
world,
for
Those dirty millennials.
I
Oh,
mean, in
man.
an ideal world, everybody could have a hustle and nobody would work for anybody, right? But maybe that's the world we're moving into? Maybe this is what happens before that. I don't know, but I think we're a ways off from that, because judging by the consolidation of, big tech and just big corporations, it seems like we're moving the opposite direction of that. But
Yeah, I
there's
think-
certainly more capability now for the individual to create a business and to, start their own thing than there ever has been before in all of
Oh,
history.
yeah. Yeah, are you kidding? It's like the entry level is so much lower than it was 20, 25 years ago. I mean, all you got to do is go down, get a, just a business license is pretty cheap at your local registrar, and get up and running, get a website, you're up and running. And it's to start a business, it just takes an idea now. You don't need an initial round of investors. So I think this would definitely be a good lead-in conversation for our next one, discussing the economy. There's a lot that could be said about this, especially where all this is going long-term.
Now, I have one question on this. Who do you think is right? Do you think the anti-work culture that still wants to work hard but for themselves is right? Or do you think get back to work, you lazy bum, make your $9 wherever, that idea is right? In my own opinion, I think the anti-work culture is right in that regard, because I really do think that the system was fair at a point in time. I really
was.
believe that, even though I didn't
was.
grow up in those days, I believe that it was fair at that point in time. And I think that system has become mostly unfair, where getting ahead became more like a lottery and less like an achievement. And so, I think that everyone that I talk to, and I have some very strong worded people that I talk to about this in the community or in my own circle of friends and family, who are like, these lazy people need to get back to work. My son won't work here. My daughter won't work here. And I'm like, okay, well, where's your son working? Oh, he's a server at a restaurant making a couple of dollars and then tips. I understand why he doesn't want to do that. Or the other one is, I'm a restaurant owner or a business owner, a small business owner, and I don't want to pay more than $11 an hour. Okay, well, I understand why you might be having a hard time there. So I'd like to know what you guys think. Who do you think is right there? And if we don't really decide as a society who's right, I don't really know what could happen. How could we even fix it?
Well, everybody's
for
got to
me-
earn their stripes. I'll just say everybody's got to kind of everybody's got to work a few shit jobs before you move up the ladder, right? Now, if you're stuck there, then that's definitely a problem. Like, if there's no upward mobility, and then, yeah, there's a social problem there. If inflation and your purchasing power has been reduced over time so much that you can't have a sustainable living, even after getting a degree or after having some measure of education, then that's definitely problematic. But if it's just, I don't want to work this crappy job for a couple of years to get to the next step, and it's that kind of attitude, then I can't really sympathize with that, because I had to work those crappy jobs for many years.
But do you think that
But does that
I-
mean
I-
everybody else has to?
but I agree with that, Nate, but I
Doesn't mean
also
everyone-
think that takes on a little bit of the, I hate to say it this way, but my dad was abusive, so I'm going to be abusive kind of, mentality. I think we maybe suffered that abuse of, you had to work those junk jobs. Was there a place for it? Yes, of course. Was there a reason for it? Yes. Did you do it willingly? Probably, mostly. But does that mean that that's the way it should continue?
I think so, because I don't think you automatically at 16 years old or when I started working and when I was delivering papers as a kid, I didn't expect to make minimum wage. You
Sure,
don't
right.
make minimum wage. You have, like, there's something that's learned at that level. Now, like I said, if there is no ability to be upwardly mobile, then that's a problem. And
Yes, right. Yeah, I
if you're
agree.
trapped in a job where your labor is being exploited, then we're getting in a conversation about what, Marxism,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But and the bourgeoisie and the proletariat and all that. But yeah, no, I don't see it as I don't see hard work. I think it instills within people something extremely valuable, especially when from a preparedness standpoint. Because the fact is that if there ever was a breakdown of society, things are going to get tough, and you are going to have to work to
Yeah, oh
survive.
yeah,
It's
oh
not
yeah.
just going to be like, oh, what, my internet's not working, or I don't want to have to flip burgers in this climate controlled place where I get nice breaks and I don't have to worry about people shooting me. Like, we're not going to have that. We're going to remember that as being a
The good
very
times.
luxurious experience. Even the worst shitty mundane humdrum job is going to seem very good by comparison. So all I'm saying is that maybe having a little bit of hard knocks and having a little bit of strife is not a bad thing. Like, I don't like this coddled mentality where everything should just be easy and given to you. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying.
No, yeah, right.
I wouldn't consider me having to work a job and maybe not make top dollar right away as abuse. I think it's kind of a false equivalency.
Yeah, that's not what I was trying to that's not what I was trying to convey. I guess more what I meant was, the system, like we said, was fair at a certain time. And I think there was a sort of opportunity that everybody who worked hard enough could advance. And I kind of think that the statistics that we see now, I mean, when they talk about our labor shortage, there are, I forget how many it was. It was like 30 million, maybe 20 million. It was like almost 20% of our entire shortage is over 65s who got out of the labor force. And so is that a product of that system being broken, that they're still working those low end jobs at 65 just to make their bills? Or is that, is that something else that we're seeing? And I do think that I agree with you completely that you shouldn't be able to go in and make what the business owner makes. I also think that you should, let's face it, we give our lives with work, whether your whole work is your side hustle, whether your work is, YouTube, whether it's Walmart, no matter where it is, you are giving your life to that time at your employment.
Yeah,
I think that as you give your life, you need to be able to get something in return. And I think that right now that return that you're getting is barely scraping by. And I think that we see the big dogs on top. Look at what happened with Kroger. Kroger said we have to raise prices, inflation, wages, everything. And they said, but wait, we are going to give 80 million, I believe it was, to employment wages. We're going to give that to next year, 80 million. It was 0.5% of what they made. So where did the rest of that money go? Of course, some of it went into upkeep, maintenance, all those different things, opening up new branches. But the CEO of Kroger made more in that year that he had to that the company had to charge more. He made more in that year than he has ever made in his life. So I think we are just a part of a broken system, and we sort of accept that as being, that's just the way it is. And I don't know why. It might be because we are personally, like, everyone wants to get ahead. I mean, and so where do we reach that point where the people who don't get ahead get mad at everyone who does?
Yeah, I was
What were
going
you
to
gonna
say,
say,
like,
Cliff?
I was going to say, what you were talking about over there, like as far as like the small percentage, I stopped doing a lot of things for, I don't, maybe I shouldn't say this, but for the American Cancer Society, for some of the fundraisers, because I was doing stuff that was very near and dear to my heart as a cancer survivor myself, and talking with the people and trying to raise this money for this good cause. And then I find out that our whole thing that we organized for Relay for Life paid like half of this one CEO's salary for the year. It was just like,
all your work.
again, going back to everything being so fake, but But then
Yeah.
going back to the whole entry level job thing, I mean, my first job, I was bussing tables for tips, and after that, I was cleaning toilets at a deli. But you learn how to. I mean, that's the school of hard knocks. You learn how to show up to work on time. You show how to be
Right.
presentable and how to talk with people, how to talk with customers, how to be accountable, and how to come back from lunch break on a good time. A lot of the people nowadays, where they go to the schools and they get in a whole bunch of debt there, or maybe their parents paid for all of it and they never had a job because their parents wanted them to focus on their education. Then they come out and they're making six figures right off the bat. They don't have that same kind of work ethic from the school of hard knocks for, on those little things. How do you talk with your coworkers? How do you become a leader in what you do, whether you're the janitor or you're the CEO of the company? You have to build that up through school of hard knocks. And then going back to the original question that Brad had was who is right. I don't know if one side or the other is going to be right. I always gravitate to the people that have skin in the game, and for me, skin in the game means that you have people that depend on you. So whether that be a spouse or kids and stuff, like whatever you're doing to provide for them, I know that you're coming from the right place because you have people that count on you, have your skin on the game for the next generation of our race, the human race.
Yeah, I got what you mean. What do you think,
Yeah,
Chris?
the guy's like busting his ass, there should be a chance for him to have that upward mobility. Like if there, and we're talking very generally here, but there's so many different types of professions, and some are going to be better than others with respect to what we're talking about. But, I just think that, maybe we are seeing drying up of those opportunities. Maybe our people are feeling that there's opportunities, but there's just not enough to get the bills paid. So this is where you're getting this pushback now, and maybe the next election will bring forth a hardcore socialist as a result of that. And I don't mean to bring the conversation into politics, but this is usually how the pendulum swings, right? So we may actually see, if people are really feeling pinched on the dollar, then we might see a push for that sort of thing in the next elections.
Yeah,
we've kind of seen it here in Canada already, but
I get you completely. I don't think that somebody should come in there and just be given anything. I don't think that, at all. And in fact, a lot of people are like, oh man, I wish I had some property that I could just sit out there and, have my chickens and goats and cows and garden and all this. I'm like, you have no idea what you're asking for, because even if you don't work for anybody, if you had to garden just to get all of your own food, you would have no free time in your life.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think one of the things I was going to say is we the four of us, we kind of come from similar backgrounds, right? I hate to use the word self-made men, but I mean, we've learned to work hard. We've learned things that our parents' generation, that was part of the culture. And fortunately, I feel like those are good qualities that we inherited. But we're now moving into the information age at a whole new level, where it's not physical skills. It's your mental knowledge. It's your ability to do things mentally that the previous generations, just that opportunity wasn't there. And I kind of got a glimpse of it when I began, starting a business 15 years ago, doing web development. And I began to see, for me personally, I was thinking about this the other day. I've been in one office job where I had to physically go into an office in my entire life. I've only been in one, and it lasted for a month, and just, didn't work out. And I was just glad. But all that to say, I've realized that all it takes is knowledge, and the tools are there now. And this generation coming behind us, that's the opportunity for them that previous generations just didn't have. And I can't remember if it's Robert Kiyosaki or who I read that explained corporate America up until about the mid 80s. They had certain ethos and certain foundations that their, corporate mission statements were, to better the company, better their employees, better their community. And that was a solid part. I was watching a documentary, for example, on Detroit, how these huge car corporations, they invested heavily in the community and built these beautiful schools. But it was around about the mid 80s where the mindset within corporate America began to shift. And if you've ever seen the movie, what was it? The Wall Street movie, where totally, I'm seeing his face, but
Michael Douglas.
Yeah. Where he gets up and gives that big speech at the end about greed is good. And that was the whole shift kind of in corporate America, where it becomes investor driven. And I'm saying all this, and again, to just point out what I feel like the sentiment is kind of gotten into our economy in America, is that people realize, like you were talking about, Cliff, the guys at the and this is not me saying I don't think executives should be rewarded. I'm not saying
Of
that.
course, right.
It's just look, I believe there's enough wealth to go around for everybody. But as I own 2 businesses and I have multiple employees, and I know at the end of the day, I've got to take care of them. And I could pocket a lot more money, but I'm not going to. I want to invest in them because they invest in me, and it's good for everybody. And I really genuinely want to take care of my people that work for me. And so all that to say, I think a lot of that's been lost, and that's where you're seeing these anti-work sentiments come up. And as you pointed out, Nate, again, when I look at people like AOC and Bernie Sanders, and I can see why they are becoming popular with the younger people who feel like they've been locked out of corporate America, out of this capitalistic system that has not rewarded them at all. And I could see why socialism would be appealing. But to the work ethic conversation, yeah, I'm glad that I went through that. I waited tables. I worked. It's funny when you were talking about what was the movie, the Taco Bell movie? Yeah, I worked at Taco Bell when that movie came out, and I never went to see the movie, but we had to promote all their stupid cups and stuff. And I was like, what's up with this movie? I guess because Taco Bell was in it. So I never knew that. But yeah, I've gone through all the horrible jobs, but I don't know. For my children, I just don't know. Do they need to go through the gauntlet, or do I want to encourage them to increase their knowledge, their skills, and they can start off where it took me 20 years to build to? I don't know.
Well, Jordan Peterson has this concept where I can't remember exactly what it's called, but in any system, what happens is a small amount of the players do like the most amount of the work or make the most amount of the money. So there's this huge disproportion in any system, any human system. So if you're like in an office, say,
the 80-20 rules, yeah, like that.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule, exactly.
Yeah.
But what happens is it reaches a tipping point at some point with the economy, whereby if there's not an equilibrium maintained, then it indeed can lead to social chaos, like what we've seen with the We Are the 99% movement, what we probably seen a little bit of, percolating all the way up until that point, and what we're probably going to see in the future, because you are seeing a wealth gap increase. So that you can have a wealth gap to a degree, because you have to create incentive for people to want to work, that whole line of thinking. But at some point, we're entering the realm of, there's now going to be trillionaires pretty soon, and you're also going to have a larger part of the population who doesn't, even if they work, is barely just getting by, even though technological deflation should in theory be bringing the cost of everything down. Right. Why is the price of everything going up? So that's where you get into how devalued has the currency actually become then, if technology has made the price of like producing a calorie of food that much cheaper, yet you're paying more for it. So, how does that work? It should be the other way around. Everything should be getting cheaper, but it's getting more expensive.
Yeah.
So this is where it's going to reach this tipping point at some point. And I worry that around the same time that happens, with this whole COVID stuff, we're going to move into a very, what they call like a turnkey totalitarian state, essentially, whereby the powers that be would have the ability to bring the hammer down with relative ease, because we have cameras everywhere, like everything is controlled. Like you're going to have, at some point, people are going to opt in for a chip, with the whole Neuralink thing, because it's going to give you superpowers, or it's going to let you have like thought sex, like in Demolition Man or something, so with other people, like just on the street, you'll be able to walk by. Hey, you want to have thought sex? Okay, let's do it. There won't be.
I love that Demolition Man's the underlying theme of this.
Yeah, I guess we get a title for this video. Yeah.
I can't wait for the thumbnail on it.
Anyways, go watch that movie, guys. But I foresee trouble on the horizon with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger question is, where's all this going? I mean, if in 50 years from now, none of us need to work because everything's automated, that's I've thought about that a lot as well. I know that's been one of the conversations in the Star Trek series, where they got to a point in humanity where work wasn't necessary. I know I'm going kind of off on a tangent here, but I am curious where this is going, and I feel like the transition to where it ultimately will go will be a rough ride.
And the question is how does that blend with our current economic model, which is just about profits?
Oh, yeah. Right now, nothing like, yeah.
So that only comes about with extreme resistance and turmoil, because the people who are profiting want to keep those profits going by any means necessary.
Yeah.
So, this is where the situation gets complicated, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested to hear what the community has to say about it, and what our viewers' thoughts are, who they think is right, and where they think the kind of the bad things that maybe would come from each one of these things, because let's face it, both of those options, have negativity with them. One is, like you said, as it becomes profit based, then you have to squeeze the lower end that much more to keep your profits going up higher. And the other side is where no one has a chance to get ahead, because no one is really working or willing to work. And so your ability to get ahead becomes less and less, because everything else begins to be taken away from you. So I'd be interested to see what the kind of general thought process is on this movement, and just where that might lead us to in other parts. Does that have a play in with crime? Does that have, like you said, with turnkey totalitarianism, does that have a play in there? I think that we might just be seeing, what's the name of that tray that has all the meat and the cheese on it?
Cucumber. It starts with a C.
Chartreuse.
Oh, it's so close. I know. Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Some sort of board.
We're not going to look like idiots, but we know what you're saying.
Not at all. Charcuterie board or something. Charcuterie board, I think.
So close. Okay. Yes.
Don't use these big words on us.
I know Nate's over there Googling it right now. He's gonna look smart here in a second. He's like, I just let you guys all look like idiots.
Right. I believe that we might have this sort of, smorgasbord, I guess, would be more on my mental.
Okay,
thinking.
that's better. Yes, smorgasbord.
Yeah, of where we're, what's playing into this problem and where we'll be at in 2022, which was kind of what we wanted to focus on here, I think, is, what to get ready for. I mean, look at all that we're facing. You've got Omicron, or whatever the next variant of COVID is. You've got the mandates and passports and control measures. You've got Ukraine and Russia and the potential for that to have real fallout as far as the rest of the world goes. Chris, before we kind of talked about whether we would even broach Ukraine and Russia, one of the strong points that you made was that America as a powerhouse is dwindling. We aren't seen anymore. Yeah, our reach is dwindling. We're becoming more of, we're going to sanction you, rather than there was a real threat of physical action by the country and its allies. And as that happens, I think that we're kind of like, a mean old man. I think you can be mean and you can be tough, when you're younger, and everyone's going to feel repercussion if they stand up to you. But as you get older, people kind of like laugh at you, and then there comes a point in time where other people might be mean to you. And I think we might be entering that point.
And
I think we're just wary,
because Biden today, I think he said that the U.S. has never unilaterally done anything that ran counter to NATO. And I'm just thinking about like every war in the last, I don't know,
50 years.
Yeah. Has NATO ever, been behind each one of these engagements from the get-go? So I think the obvious thing is that Russia's a force to be reckoned with, unlike one of these smaller countries that you can just go in there and, act as a sandbox for your experimenting with your new toys. Russia's serious business, right? So you can't be making those kind of threats without, creating a major conflagration. Would not be good. Let's hope that it doesn't come to that. But it's very interesting to see that dynamic unfold. And if there's any any geopolitical experts in the comment section. I'm curious to know, there's all this talk about, there's very little talk about the enmity between Russia and China. Because if I was a superpower in that part of the world, I'd be worried about like the superpower next door more than I would the one across the world. So I really wonder what's going on there, because now you got Russia selling India S-400 missile defense systems, which got me thinking, like, aren't they supposed to be kind of on China's side in this whole thing? But
Yeah,
you know,
right.
maybe there's a lot more to that story that we don't really hear about in the West, because I'm sure, you know, this is why I've often thought if there is like a World War III, it's probably not just going to be like like one side versus the other. It's probably going to be like, you know, 3 or 4 different groups or allied
Factions,
nations factions going at it, because there's just too many conflicting interests. Like, why would, you know, if China and Russia team up against the USA, obviously I'm oversimplifying here, but, you know, then they have to, like, how are they all of a sudden just buddy just because of, you know, the shared communist sentiment? I don't know. It just doesn't seem, something seems a lot, it should be more complex, because if Russia's selling India these missile systems, and India and China are pretty much, they're not enemies necessarily, but they're certainly not allies.
Yeah, they're opposing, right?
Yeah, so it's an interesting situation. So I'm going to leave it up to our expert commenters to explain that whole situation for us.
I love all the call to actions that has been gone by
Yeah.
you and Brad. Those are masterfully done. So.
Right on.
Cliff, what would you say? I'd kind of like, you know, because we're wrapping up the year here and we're looking to what kind of lies ahead in 2022. What do you think a lot of viewers right now are thinking about? I'm going to make my last buys of 2021. And of course, we're all going to do it at CanadianPreparedness.com because I'm ready. But as
Get
people,
my credit card out.
Yep.
You
Discount
just did a
code
video.
Survival Prepper, 10% off.
For now.
Still.
You just did a video, Cliff, about some purchases. You know, what do you think that people should be thinking about? Should they just be filling their gaps, or, you know, what were your thoughts going into that video?
Oh, well, I mean, I've been focusing a lot on food videos, because I think everyone can relate to food, because everyone likes eating food, or they need to eat food. So
Sure.
that's always the most important for us preppers. I think I like thinking of it in terms of topping off. So ensuring that we're always topped off. Our gas tanks are topped off, our savings accounts are topped off, our water supplies topped off, our pantries topped off, and doing those kind of things over the winter. Right now, it's like we're into it. I mean, winter is coming. Winter's here. And so it's kind of hard to catch up on some of the winter preps that I know the Canadian Prepper has covered a lot on his channel for those type of supplies. But I think just getting your the financial stuff in order, because 2022, you know, it worries me a lot of the stuff. So I'm trying to diversify what I think might hold value. I think food will always have value. Actually, it'll probably go up in value. But that can of beans that you bought will probably be worth more in 2023 or 2024. And so for me, those seem like good purchases. It's just as good of a purchase for me as it is of buying, you know, my silver, or putting, like, every month I buy a little bit more silver, a little bit more gold, a little bit more the Bitcoin and Ethereum, and a little bit more canned beans and a little bit more rice. So I think just in general, just topping off where you're at, and then trying to, due to some of the concerns with the crime and some of the stuff we talked about earlier in this video, as far as beefing up where you think you might have vulnerabilities, where your weak points are.
That's smart.
Where the weakest link in the chain is, and doing that. So that's what I'm doing. And I think a lot of what I'm doing now is I for my channel, at least, I'm a prepper first, and I do videos second. Like, so I've been trying to do a lot of these things because there's stuff that I'm concerned about as a person, and as a family. And so that's just, I have a greater sense of urgency over the last year on putting these preparedness measures into place, even a little more than like sharing what I'm doing. Because there's stuff that I'm doing where I used to treat YouTube as a way that I could share and bounce around ideas. Now there's some stuff I don't want to talk about, because it's like that's secret stuff. I also don't show my underwear too, but that's private as well. But but yeah, that's just where what I'm looking at right now for the future.
What do you think, Chris? You know, what are you getting ahead on as far as your own purchases? Or if someone was like, hey, you know, what should I focus on? What would you tell them?
I mean, we're going to do a video talking about that this week, this very issue, you know, about preparing for next year. And by the time this video is released or that other video will be released, but it touches on some of these very simple topics that are not glamorous. It's not, go build a bunker, go do anything big. I mean, it's just get your finances in line even more if possible, learning some basic budgeting skills, things that people should have been doing all along. I know the YouTube channel Prepper Princess, that's her big focus to try to give that practical information. And I appreciate what she brings. Looking at your health. For me, I just did a marathon about a month and a half ago. And oddly enough, I'm having some things that I've kind of neglected, put on a few pounds. And I realize at the end of the day, if I don't have my health, I have nothing. And that for me is a big priority. And I'm going to try and encourage that. And again, food, making sure you have ways to either filter, process, store water, these things that, again, what we saw in Texas this year with there's big snowmageddon, this could be the kind of initial phases. And again, like what Nate saw in Canada with these major ecological events that have been called once in 500 years. We might start seeing those more of once in 5 years, and in time, those might become once in a year.
Could you imagine?
If it progresses on the course which the scientific community seems to believe it will. So all that to say, there's so many threats, but just cover the foundations. Get your food ready, get your water ready, and if you got those covered, you're pretty far ahead.
Nate, you
go to Canadian Preparedness to get a saw or something for sure.
Nate, you kind of have an advanced position there.
The world.
Yeah.
What might be, you kind of have a unique position, I think, where you can see what people of all steps, whether they're just getting into preparedness or they're hardcore preppers, and you see their purchasing and kind of like you get an idea of what people are going after. What are you seeing as big movement items right now? Did everyone get afraid of Omicron and they're buying masks nonstop, or have they moved on to self-defense? What do you see that might trend what we're going to see in 2022?
Well, I mean, I won't say don't invest in bullet manufacturers and firearms companies. Is that a double negative? But yeah, I mean, it might be good to look into that, but I think there is definitely people are buying the personal protective equipment like masks a bit more. There was a bit of a lull. Now that the Omicron is coming back, people are starting to get more concerned with that. Really, I've always said any prepping supply for the most part is not going to depreciate that much. So it's very hard to make a bad decision financially if you're not putting yourself into debt. I made a video today because I had an email from a woman who was a single mom, and she was very frantic, and she had purchased one of the most expensive outdoor tents that we sell, and it's like a $2,000 tent, and I'm trying to talk her out of it because I get the sense that perhaps the priority isn't in the right place, and I personally know like my whole goal with that store is to get people what they need.
Right.
And I don't want to sell people things that are going to sit in the closet and fester or not even ever get used, or that they're going to regret later on, or that they're going to buy out of fear. I want somebody, if they're going to buy something, for them to, maybe they don't use it for 5 years, but if they do pull it out, it's still going to be a great knife that they can use, and maybe they're going to go and beat that knife up for a season,
Yeah, right.
Or it's so I don't, I really want to encourage people to prioritize and not put themselves into insurmountable debt, getting all of the bells and whistles before covering their main bases, like the food and the Berkey water system, or just the things that you are going to ultimately use no matter what. So I would just encourage, if you want to if we're talking about what to buy, you can never go wrong with freeze-dried food, the good stuff, the quality stuff, because it tastes good, and the best brands like Mountain House, Peak Refuel is delicious. Happy Yak is delicious. What are some other ones? There's a few other ones, but there's a lot of junk too. And these last for 25 years on the package. Realistically, they last for like probably 40 years.
Yeah.
So it's funny when I get, some emails from people who, are, pushing like 60, 70, right? And they're wondering if the expiration date is going to be 30 years. And I'm like, okay, well, it's
Lifetime.
It's
Lifetime for you, buddy.
like it's going to last. Don't worry. Okay. So yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So
Cliff,
anyways.
you're covering your face.
That's hilarious. That's like,
Well,
if
it's the
you're
truth, right?
over the age of 60, lifetime.
That stuff is
I
gonna
guarantee
last
it. I guarantee lifetime for you, buddy.
It literally says 2051 on the can. 2051. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to be around in 2051.
That's right. Yeah, right.
So yeah, just, get it while you can. If you see a good deal, take the deal, because chances are the prices are going to be going up drastically. The distributors, manufacturers are raising their prices in increments now. They've kind of gotten wise. They don't want to do the big jumps. They're trying to do like the 5% every other month. So, if you can afford something, get it. If and if you need, talk to the community, about whether or not it's a good purchase, because, maybe they'll set you on the right course. And I, at some point, do want to do some kind of consulting service where, I can't just do it by myself, obviously, but where, if people have questions about, do I need a $2,000 tent, right off the hop?
Right.
Or could I be investing in something else? If they need a little bit of guidance in that respect, I think it's important that people have that. So it's something that I'm considering doing in the future.
That's smart.
How I'm going to set that up is not known. It's just an idea right now, but so Chris, don't steal my idea.
I knew you were going to say that. I swear. I was sitting there. I was like, when's he going to say it? I'm over here going to GoDaddy to get Canadian preparedness. What is it? Consulting.com. Sorry, Nate, you got to buy that for $50,000.
1-900 prepper. $1 the first minute. $2
I'm still fighting for CanadianPrepper.com, believe it or not.
Oh,
I had a woman ask me today on the channel. She said she was trying to buy some things for her grandchildren, I believe, and what should she get, and named off all these different things. And I replied to her with a comment just saying, my opinion would be to buy your grandchildren camping gear. The sleeping bag that's equivalent for your area, plus a little colder, a water filter, some solar lights, just normal camping gear. But more importantly than that, invite them over to your house, whether it's an apartment or, a brick house, and take them camping in your backyard or in the living room or whatever it might be. Shut off the power and use that equipment. And then next time, go outside and do it and spend that quality time together actually doing those things. Because then no matter what happens, if your power goes out, if you don't have that prepackaged food that you like, you know what to do, because it's just like an extended camping trip. So I like your guys' idea of just getting those necessities squared away. Nate, I applaud you there for not just letting the individual you were talking about make that purchase, or at least trying to make sure that they are making an educated purchase, because you're right. There's a lot of things you could spend a lot of money on that you're going to get quality for that money, of course, but could you spend that same amount of money wisely and get a breadth of preparedness? So I really like that idea. And I hope that a lot of people who are watching kind of take that and take it to their friends and family and say, okay, let's just get started on this.
Yeah, as a prepper, I'm always, anytime I'm buying anything, it has to be dual purpose. One is for whatever it is, like if you're camping, getting camping stuff, but the dual purpose is, okay, how could this be used for prepping? So the vehicles that you get or the type of food that you're getting at the grocery store has to be dual purpose for prepping, survival type situations, or anything really. And I think that's a strategy that I try to do a lot. So that's cool to hear that others talking about.
Smart.
Good strategy. Yeah. Awesome.
Guys, I think that we're what are we at on time? Chris?
almost 2 hours.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh.
I think that
Yeah.
we only covered a percentage of what we wanted to tonight, but we covered a lot of things in great detail, and I'm interested to see how the community takes to some of those discussions and what they're doing in their own houses to prepare. Did anybody here on the channel have anything else to cover tonight?
Do it in the next video.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are going to bring a video up soon where we're going to talk about the economy and maybe those side hustles that we each can get into, and sort of making that return on investment of our own time and what you can do, on an individual level to get ready for that coming economic event or series of events. So I hope you'll come back to that video. Make sure that you subscribe to us here at Think Preparedness and check out each individual channel and make sure that, maybe something that Nate says makes more sense than something that I say. I'm sure it will, or any of the other
Especially
guys here.
tonight.
Yeah, especially tonight, because it was gross what I was talking about.
I might have got you once or twice.
So I appreciate you guys
Don't
taking
give
the
it
time
back.
to watch with us, and I hope that you'll stick around and get ready for the year 2022.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Hey, you can't say that on YouTube. Shh.
Oh my goodness.
Are they going to leave a comment about the three seashells too? We have to bring it back to Demolition
Merry
Man at the end.
Xmas. Say Xmas. And Happy New Year.
Yes, Merry
Yeah.
Holiday time. Yes.
Okay, that's better. Thank you. Thank you for the correction.